Hey everyone, let us look at this question on the screen here. From the information given, what is the biggest flaw in the study? A film critic is interested in knowing which is the most popular film of the year amongst Americans. To answer this question, he conducts a telephone poll in the New York metropolitan area and asks each person to name their favorite film of the year. Now we need to find what the biggest flaw is. There might be more than one flaw, but we need to find the biggest flaw. And we are given options A through E. So it could be participation bias, selection bias, setting may not encourage honest responses, confounding variables, or wording of the question. Now, the first two, A and B, we've got participation bias and selection bias. These might be new terms to you, so if you don't already have the notes for Chapter 5 and what participation bias is and what selection bias is, you might want to go ahead and download those. The link will be in the description. Let's just revisit what they are. So, selection bias occurs when the researcher selects their sample in a way that doesn't accurately represent the population. For example, if a researcher wants to learn about the typical diet of college students, but they only interview females, this study will suffer from selection bias because they've ignored or they haven't selected the male or non-binary students. So the population would not be represented accurately because they didn't select it very well, the sample very well. And then participation bias, another very common one. It occurs when people choose whether they want to participate or not. So, for example, phone-in surveys may not accurately represent the population because the people who feel very strongly, either positively or negatively about a topic, are more likely to call in than the people who feel more neutral. So those are the two most common ones. I'm not saying necessarily that all surveys or all experiments or whatever will suffer from one of these two, but those are the two common biases, and there are two options here. So let's just reread the question. Actually, before we do that, let me just touch on what C, D, and E are. So option C was the setting may not encourage honest responses. So if someone was conducting a survey about something a little more, I don't know, personal, like drug use or relationship activities, a little personal, and they were doing it in like a police station or the principal's office, somebody might not feel very comfortable in that setting talking about things honestly. So that would be an example of the setting not being good for honest responses. Confounding variables are things that can occur that may not be taken into account in the study. This happens a lot in experiments, for instance, like just for example, let's say somebody was testing the effectiveness of a new cholesterol drug. A confounding variable would be something that they're not really able to measure. Like, for instance, they may test this drug out on 750 new people, and they might find out, yeah, the drug works great, it's perfect. But is it just the drug that was good? Or did the 750 people, did they do other things in their life they didn't maybe mention or didn't measure? Like maybe they changed their diet without being told to, or without being part of the study, or maybe they changed their exercise habits, or who knows. There are different things that could affect the result of that study, and that would be a confounding variable. And then wording of the question, whenever someone is doing a study, they want to make it as clear and neutral as possible in how they word it. They don't want to make it sound positive, they don't want to make it sound negative, and they don't want to make it too confusing. So these are the possible flaws for the study. Let's go ahead and figure out which one is the biggest one for this one. So just to recap, film critic is interested in knowing which is the most popular film of the year amongst Americans. To answer this question, he conducts a telephone poll in the New York metropolitan area and asks each person to name their favorite film of the year. Here's what I notice. He is interested in the most popular film of the year amongst Americans. Just Americans. But he only asks people in the New York metropolitan area. Why? If I'm interested in American opinion in general, I would like to ask people from all different states and different types of towns why weren't Mainers involved in this, or people from New Hampshire or California or Arizona. They're all Americans. So for some reason, this person only got information from New Yorkers in the metropolitan area. So this person did not select very well. The information they're going to get, it's not going to be representative of all Americans. It's really just going to be representative of New Yorkers in the metropolitan area. So it's not going to meet the requirements. So I would say the biggest flaw of the study is selection bias. They wanted information about all Americans, but only talked to some New Yorkers. So not a very good selection. It's not representative of the entire population they were interested in. So this one would be selection bias. I will leave links in the description to the resources for chapter 5 and any other similar videos that you may be interested in. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.